Well, welcome to Lamb's Fellowship. If this is your first time with us, that's our head pastor, Buzzy, and like he said, he's out in Kentucky teaching at a conference. And my name is Joshua Montgomery. I'm the director of youth ministry here at Lamb, so I run the high school and middle school ministry and a couple other things. Yeah! Thank you. And so I'm really excited that you guys are with us on this Sunday morning. A couple of things I want to celebrate just real quick. Buzzy had mentioned Coffee with Pastor. Who's been to that? Has anybody ever been to that? Couple of us? Okay. So that's kind of like our new Meet the Leadership. So if you've been here for a long time, we used to do Meet the Leadership. We've changed it to Coffee with Pastor. And we want to encourage, if you've been here for a long time, we want to challenge you to maybe be an ambassador family and come to one of those, meet some of the new families, talk about where you're serving, talk about what you love about this place, and just get them more tethered in and connected. And if you're new in the last 6 months, maybe even the last year, and haven't attended one of those, we want to challenge you guys. It's the first Sunday of every month. So coming up in October, that first Sunday, it's right over here in the fellowship hall. If you don't know where that is, it's where you drop off all of the children. And so it's in that room the first Sunday of the month. And then we also this month started our starting point class. And so, yeah, it's awesome. So did anybody go to that class this morning for the first service? They're going home, okay. And so first service was starting point class. It's kind of part of our discipleship pathway. And so if you're new to our church and haven't gone through that, we want to encourage you to go through that as well. And then also in September, another important date coming up, September 26th. Mark that in your calendars. That is my 29th birthday. So if you want to celebrate my birthday, it's on that day. And I don't know, are you guys like birthday people, birth week people, birth month people, birth trimester people, birth year people? Like, I don't know. For me, I'm a birth month person. I like my birth month. And so I've told the high school students plenty of times that I believe that if you're celebrating a birthday, you should be able to receive a gift every day leading up to your birthday, okay? So if you're a parent in this room and their birth month is coming up, you start off small, just like a Cheerio, Lucky Charm, marshmallow. Those are always delightful, even if it's just one. You know, wrap that up, you give them a marshmallow the next day, and then you go all the way up to the Lamborghini. So you don't just give them the Lamborghini on their birthday, but they've had this whole build-up. It's super worth it. And so, like, I super love my birth month. I'm going to be 29. It's kind of crazy. I'm excited about it. I feel like I've had a really good life, and I've had a lot of good birthdays. And here's the deal. Like, I think it's interesting that we do get kind of obsessed about birthdays and time and all these kind of things. And I think at the end of the day, time is actually what we're worried about. Because a birthday is just one more trip around the sun, right? Like, you're just one trip around the sun older. And so for me, like, birthdays, like, they're important, but when it really dials down to it, it's just time. It's just you've been alive for a longer amount of time. And our culture is pretty obsessed with time. Even if you're about to give your time to somebody, you're calculating if it's worth the time you're about to sacrifice. One of our favorite things is canceled plans because it means we get time we didn't expect to have. And so our culture is obsessed with time. If you've been in a college course or high school class or a DMV waiting line, like, you've looked at your clock and thought, how much longer is this going to drain on, right? Like, how much longer do I have to sit in this chair? How much longer do I have to listen to that monotone voice? And maybe you have even sat in your office before and you know that you have a bunch of stuff to get done in the day and you're just calculating how much time you have until your next 10-minute break. And for me, like, I mean, I worked out with Buzzy once, and when I work out with Buzzy, he's just, like, so into it, and, like, it's hard for me to keep up because he's super jacked. And so, like, we did this CrossFit workout once where I had to do double under jumps, and, like, that's not for humans. That's where you have to, like, wrap, like, I don't know, like, maybe in kindergarten I could have done that, like, where you have to, like, jump and it has to go around you twice before you land. And I'm short, so I have an advantage, and I still couldn't do it. And so I'm doing this workout, and I'm trying to get through it, and there's a red clock on the back wall, and it's counting down from 10 minutes, and I had to do this movement for 10 minutes, and so I convinced myself that if I closed my eyes tight enough, you know, like really tight where your eyes start having like the stars popping up, it's like where you feel really strong, like, wow, I can close my eyes really strong. Like, I kind of have buff eyelids right now. You know what I mean? Like that kind of thing. And so you close them really tight. I thought if I closed them tight enough, that, you know, that 10-minute clock would just disappear, and I'd open them up and it'd be done. So I'd close my eyes super tight for like 5 minutes at a time, and I would open my eyes up and like 10 seconds would pass on the clock. And it's like time. It's so crazy. Like time is something that we absolutely value. And maybe even you're in this room right now, and you're worried about, okay, like if this goes over, I won't have enough time to stop at Stater Brothers. I won't have enough time to cook lunch. The game's going to be in halfway through the first quarter before I even sit down. And it's stressful. We're worried about time. And it's crazy. This question, what time is it, is a question that anyone who has a toddler has been asked a million times. But like I ask this question all the time. What time is it? What time is it? Probably every 6 hours I find myself just not having a notification on my phone, not really wanting to look through anything on my phone, and I'll just click it on because I want to know what time it is. Like how much time do I have until the next thing? And even yesterday, we woke up early in the morning and we got a lot of stuff done, and I remember thinking to myself, wow, it's only 2 o'clock and we still have all of this time left in the day. And even at night, like I'll be sitting in my bed and I'm watching Netflix and I'm like, how many more seasons of The Office can I watch? And it's like, how much time do I have? It's midnight, so 2 seasons, you know what I mean? And it's just crazy, it's crazy. Like, we are obsessed with time. And I think we ask that question a lot, what time is it? But I think there's another question hidden in that we really, are truly asking. And that question is, what am I doing with my time? The question, what time is it, versus the question, what am I doing with my time, is very different. And even to take another step, what is the Holy Spirit challenging me to do with my time? I was thinking back on parts of my life as I was writing this sermon, and I was thinking about how some of the biggest regrets in my life aren't the things I did, but they're the things I didn't do. When I was a sophomore in college, in between sophomore and junior year, I hiked a portion of the Appalachian Trail. If you don't know what the Appalachian Trail is, it's this 2,000-mile trail that goes from Georgia to Maine, and I hiked from Damascus, Virginia, 950 miles up to Mount Everett in Connecticut, and it took 70 days. We walked this whole 950 miles trailway. I lived off of a bag on my back. I showered once. I smelled gross, and if you're really stalkerish, you can go to my Instagram and scroll back to 8 years ago, and you can see my first mustache hair. So I posted about it. I said, finally growing facial hair. And it's posted and it's just 2 little strands. It looks like I just picked off some eyebrows and taped them to my lip. But it's so crazy. We're on this trail and we're hiking. And a part of this trip was that, occasionally, because food doesn't grow on trees. Wait, it does, right? I mean, it does grow on trees. But because, we wanted to eat food that didn't grow on trees, we would go in to town and we'd resupply on food. And so we went into this town in New York, and this kind of sounds like the beginning of a Friday the 13th kind of movie, right? Kind of a scary movie. Because we walk into this town, and we're eating breakfast, and this old, burly man comes and sits down at our table and starts asking us all these questions, what's our name, where are we from? We're clearly hikers. What's your social security number? What's your address, your date of birth? What's your mom's maiden name? That kind of stuff, And so we're sitting with this guy, and we end up finding out as we're eating breakfast with him that he's the mayor of this town that we're in, which, again, it could be a scary movie. I could sit down with any of you at breakfast if you didn't know me and be like, I'm actually the mayor of this town. Wow, that's a young mayor. And so we're sitting with him, talking with him, and he ends up inviting us to his house, which, again, we're like, yeah, sick, sounds awesome. Millennials make bad decisions. And so we walk in towards his house, and we find out that his house is buttoned right up to, the state beach that's in their town, and there's a stage with a band playing, and they have a fireworks show at night, and there's all these people dancing, and, the whole town was just, it was crazy. Everyone was just kind of there enjoying each other, and we're there towards the end of the evening, and we're thinking, okay, we probably need to leave and walk back up top to the mountain so that we can set up camp. And he asks us and she says to us, hey, if you guys want, you can just stay on my property tonight. Again, scary movie situation, right? But it turns out that this guy, his property was being used for a Hollywood movie called Magic of Belle Isle, starring Morgan Freeman and Kenan Thompson. And the set was active. And so we got to sleep on this Hollywood set at his house. And so I swam in the lake, and I ran over to the garage and showered in the outdoor shower, and I was like, I showered in the same shower as Morgan Freeman. That's kind of a cool brag. You know what I mean? I sat on the front porch and drank some coffee that morning. I was like, I'm drinking coffee in the same place that Morgan Freeman drinks coffee. I felt cool. And then this guy, it was crazy, a cool situation, because then this mayor the next morning, we're getting ready to leave, and he goes, hey, guys, if you just wait for a couple of hours, Morgan's going to be here, and I got permission to invite you guys to be on set for filming today. So you guys can watch it. You can meet Morgan, meet Kenan Thompson, and it'll be awesome. And we said, no. I know. Like, really, man? You don't want to meet Morgan Freeman? Like, okay, that's sad. And so, like, we didn't. And, like, it was crazy because we were hiking for a nonprofit organization, and so we had, like, a quota. We had to be at a certain place by a certain time, and we were already a little bit behind because we hung out the day before. And so we ended up leaving. And if I could go back to that day, I would be like, I'm staying. I'm going to meet Morgan Freeman. It's going to be the background photo on my phone for the rest of my life. Whenever someone's like, hey, you want to go see that new Morgan Freeman movie? I'd be like, oh, yeah, me and Morgan are tight. Like, I would say that kind of thing, you know? And if I could go back, I would. Like, but that moment, that opportunity is gone. That moment, that opportunity has passed. And I began to think to myself, like, I wonder if any of us or any of you have had those moments where you thought, if I could go back, if I could do it over, if I had another chance, I would do it differently. Maybe I would have done something differently. I would have done more. I would have tried harder. Maybe I would have said the right thing instead of the reactionary thing. And what I'm talking about isn't like those of you that are out there like, man, I should have sent that direct message. Like, I'm not talking about like little stuff. I'm talking about like if God set an opportunity in front of you and you walked away from it, I wonder if we think like, oh man, like I missed that. I missed that. Because I think sometimes what I'm talking about is a little deeper, where sometimes people miss out on the opportunity that God puts right in front of them, and maybe even every single day. Maybe miss out on the position that God has you in, where you might change someone's life, change your own life, change a friend or a family member's life, and we miss out on these opportunities, and it leaves us thinking, man, I wish I could go back. And here's the thing, the harsh reality is that we don't get to go back. That's the harsh reality. Like, we get one shot in that moment. We get one shot in this season. We get one shot right now. And it begs me to ask this question: what am I doing with my time? And we're going to look at a story today. I'm going to look at the life of David. If you don't know who David is, he's this man. If you've never even been to church, you may have heard of David and Goliath. If you watch sports, you hear that comparison all the time between like a good team and a bad team. You hear it all the time when a friend's going through a hard season. It's like, this is just your Goliath, like that kind of thing. David and Goliath, and he ends up being the king of Israel. And on his deathbed, he's not talking about all of his accolades. He actually begins to talk about people that impacted his life and were there for him. And this is what it says in 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 1. And if you guys want a Bible today, if you guys came here today and you want like a physical Bible, just raise your hand, because we have some ushers that will walk around and hand one out to you if you guys want to follow along. If not, you can follow on the Bible app on your phone, or we're going to put them up on the screen. This is what it says in 2 Samuel chapter 23, verse 1. It says, "These are David's last words. The voice of the son of Jesse, the voice of the man God took to the top, whom the God of Jacob made king, and Israel's most popular singer." Now, here's the thing. David's on his deathbed, okay? These are his last words. He's the greatest king Israel had known. He was the one that slayed Goliath. He's the one that wrote most of the Psalms. And he's actually one of the most written about people in the Bible. And in his last words, the final words, what he does is he speaks of the people that were closest to him. These are the guys that David went into battle with, his confidants, his friends, his important allies. And these are not the guys that history remembers. If I say David and Goliath, some of us, even if we've never been to church or haven't been in a long time, we know the reference. And there's some people that David that had following him that lived life and mimicked life like him, and we don't know them as well. There's a guy named Benaiah who followed David, was in David's guard, was a very important person, and David killed Goliath, and Benaiah killed a giant from Egypt, but we don't talk about Benaiah killing a giant. But we talk about David and Goliath, right? And so there's these people that David is talking about on his deathbed, and he knows them by name, and he talks about their accolades, and I want to focus in on one person, and this guy's name is Benaiah. Benaniah in 2 Samuel 23:20, it says this. Benaniah, son of Jehoiada from Kabzeel, was a vigorous man who accomplished a great deal. He once killed 2 lion cubs in Moab. Another time on a snowy day, he climbed into a pit and killed a lion. This guy killed a lion. Okay, I don't know if you know much about lions, but I don't want to fight them either. Okay? It says that he killed 2 lion cubs. That's cakewalk. You know what I mean? That's easy. Cubs are not as big. They don't have the cool mane. They don't got sharp teeth. You know what I mean? Like, they're little. It's fine. I get it. It's not as impressive as saying he chased down a lion on a snowy day. And I don't know about you guys. I grew up reading a lot about animals. I've been infatuated with them since I was a kid. I used to even collect these little handouts with information about them, and I kept them in a binder in my house, and people would be like, "You're a nerd." And I was like, "Yeah, but I know things about venomous snakes." You know what I mean? And so I love learning about animals, and I love going to zoos, and so I'm going to learn you some things about lions. Is that cool? I'm going to learn you some things, okay? A lion can weigh up to 500 pounds. That's a beefy boy. 500 pounds. So if you take LeBron James and you put him in a lion onesie, okay, that's 250 pounds. So you take another LeBron James, because apparently in this scenario cloning is a thing. Take another LeBron James, put him in another lion onesie, that's 250 pounds. Now, you merge them together, and that's something I'm not messing with. Okay, I'm not even going to play with that. Like, homie, don't play. I'm not messing with that. That's terrifying. And there's a reason why in wrestling and boxing they have weight classes, because there's an advantage if someone weighs more than you, right? It's not like, well, we just want to make sure it's fair. It's like, no, there's an advantage. And so it's like lions can weigh up to 500 pounds. They can run 35 miles per hour, which is faster than Usain Bolt. And there's always that one person in the room that's like, I could beat him in a race. You ain't seen me, son. In my heyday, I was fast. It's like, you weren't 35 miles an hour fast. A lion can run 35 miles per hour. And this is the craziest part. From a sitting position, they can leap forward almost 30 feet. From a sitting position. Like, my brother competes in long jump in the state of Kansas, and that's a running start. That's a full-on sprint, and he can't jump 30 feet. A lion, just hanging out, sitting on its butt, can jump 30 feet. Unreal. 500 pounds, 35 miles an hour, can jump 30 feet from a sitting position. Normal people don't chase lions. Agreed? People with brains don't chase lions, but Benaniah does. He chases this lion. And what's crazy is the word chase, right? Because to chase something, what has to happen? You have to take the first step. Because if I walk out into the woods and there's a lion and it runs away, I'm not chasing it. It's running away, okay? And I'm going to pretend that it's because I'm so jacked. That's what I'm going to pretend. But, if a lion sees something in the woods and you take the first step, that implies that you're chasing it, right? It's a fight or flight moment. And so imagine with me real quick. Benaniah comes up on this lion, right? This lion, whether it's sitting, standing, or sprinting, either way, it's terrifying. He comes up on this lion, and I like to imagine that they locked eyes, and that the Sarah McLachlan song from the animal adoption video starts playing. In the arms of an angel, far away from here. Right? Wouldn't that be amazing? They're eye locked, right? Benaniah is in the snow. It's foggy. And I don't know, you guys live in California, so you don't even know this, but in the cold places, you can see your breath. It's really cool. And so, it's this beautiful moment, right? It's kind of intense. If we were watching it in a movie, I like to pretend that it's Russell Brand or whoever that's playing Benaniah, right? And they're just standing there, staring at this lion, and he takes the first step. He takes the step at this lion, the lion bolts, and a lion, even running in the snow, is probably still faster than a man. So that means that he had to track this lion all the way back to its home, to the lion's pit. He tracks it all the way back to this pit, and Benaniah gets to the edge of this pit and gets an opportunity to decide, am I fighting this or not? Am I going to deal with this or not? And it says he takes a step back, and you're like, smart move. And then he sprints into the pit, and you're like, no. Don't do that. There's a lion in there, and it's strong. And all of a sudden, you just hear lions roaring, you hear a knife and a sword clashing, like you hear like all of this commotion and this chaos. And in that moment, you're stressed, and then immediately silence. It's just like a one-track shot of this empty field with a pit. And the whole time you're thinking, Benaniah definitely just got murdered by a lion. There's no way. And all of a sudden, Benaniah crawls out of that pit, and he's alive and the lion's not. It's an unbelievable story. Like, we have no idea why he even chased the lion. It doesn't actually make sense at all, like if you think about it. We don't know why he chased this lion. Maybe he had a bad day. You know, you guys know what a bad day is. You wake up and you thought that you had the coffee set to go off at 6, but it went off at 7, but you got to leave at 6. So you get in your car without coffee, and you're like, I'll just stop at Starbucks real quick. But it's like late start for TC, so the line is like 18 minutes long, and you wait in line for a little bit, and then you're like, I can't do this, I'm going to be late for work. So you pull out of the line, and you're behind now, and you're in traffic on the 15, and you look at your gas gauge, and your husband didn't fill up the tank, so now you're wondering if 17 miles left on your tank will get you the 45 miles you need to get to work. And then you walk in, and someone says, oh, your shoe's untied. You're like, shut up! You like just react. Do you know what I mean? Like, and it's because these things have just built up, and you just have had a bad day. So it's like maybe Benaniah just had like a rough morning, and this lion walked up at the wrong time. Like that, maybe that's what it is. I don't know. Maybe the lion was like an actual threat, right? Like maybe it was near a home where there's children, or maybe there's livestock. Maybe this lion was causing issues, and so it was like a problem and a solution, right? Like maybe there's a pragmatic reason as to why he chased down this lion. Maybe he was trying to impress a girl. You know, those first century girls love it when you kill a lion, apparently. Maybe, I don't know. Like, I've tried to impress girls doing plenty of stupid things. Like, if I looked at any messages I've sent from, like, when I was single in college and high school, I guarantee you that every single message is completely incoherent, because I was so insecure about how I talked that I would just use a thesaurus anytime I text message or call somebody, and I would just pick the biggest word. It didn't matter if it made sense. But I sounded smart. You know what I'm saying? Big brain time. That was me. And so, like, it's crazy. Maybe he was just trying to impress somebody, but, like, the reality is like, I have a theory about it. This is just a thought, but I think I know why. I think I know why why Benaniah chased this lion down. Because if I had to guess, this is what I think. I think that Benaniah grew up hearing stories about King David. David's on his deathbed, and he brings up Benaniah, right? And so that means that when Benaniah was working for David, Benaniah already knew that David had defeated Goliath. He had been hearing it. That's a story you tell. That's not a story that you're like, no, I just got to stay humble, man. I don't talk about that. Like, you talk about, if you kill Goliath, you talk about it, because it's a victory. And so, like, I think Benaniah grew up hearing these stories about David. And in 1 Samuel, before David was king, right before he goes into battle with Goliath, this is what it says in 1 Samuel 17. It said, David said, I've been a shepherd tending sheep for my father. And whenever a lion or a bear came and took a lamb from the flock, I would go after it, knock it down, and rescue the lamb. If it turned on me, I'd grab it by the throat, wring its neck, and kill it. Lion or bear, it made no difference. I would kill it. I'll do the same thing to this Philistine who is taunting the troops of God. God who delivered me from the teeth of the lion and the claws of the bear will deliver me from this Philistine. He's talking about Goliath. But what does he say first? I fought a lion. You see, Benaniah knew this story, and so when Benaniah sees this lion, where a lot of us, myself included, I'm guilty of this too, where a lot of us would see a 500-pound problem, a 500-pound issue, Benaniah saw a 500-pound opportunity to be like the king he wanted to serve. He saw a 500-pound opportunity to be like the king that he wanted to serve, the king before him that had chased down a lion. And then Benaniah had the faith to chase one himself. He wanted to be like this king. And this is what happens in 2 Samuel chapter 23, 22 through 23. It says this. These are the things that Benaniah is famous for. He was held in the greatest respect. And it says this at the end, that David put him in charge of his bodyguard. Benaniah was in charge of the mercenary group in David's military. Like special forces, bro. And Benaniah is in charge of it. And as David is on his deathbed, he says, at the beginning of this sentence, these are the things that Benaiah is famous for. He's talking about killing this lion on a snowy day. And it says, David put him in charge of his bodyguard. And I think because Benaiah was willing to chase a lion, he got the best honor possible, and he got to serve his king. He placed him over his bodyguard. What we learn from Benaiah is how you respond to the 500-pound problem in your life, how you respond to the lions in your life will determine your destiny. When Benaiah comes across a lion, he has every reason to run. We'd agree with him. He has every reason to run, every reason to hide, every reason to climb up a tree and bark. I don't know how to fight a lion. That's maybe, I don't know. Like, he has every reason and any number of things he could have done that most of us would probably tell our kids to do. Most of us, like, I'm not going to tell my 2-year-old son, like, if you come up on a lion, you chase that thing. Like, there's plenty of things that he could have done that were safer than chasing the lion, but he would have missed out on serving his king. How we respond to the lions in our life will determine our destiny, and we all have those in our life. We all know what that 500-pound problem is in this room, the 500-pound problem in your personal life, in your marriage, in your relationships, in your private life. Like, we all know what the 500-pound problem is. And maybe it's something that you're nervous about or anxious about, where you know that someone's going to say something or do something, and it's just going to turn you off for the rest of the day. Or maybe it's a tough conversation that you need to have with your husband or your wife, and it's a conversation that you're like, I just don't want to deal with that. I just want to put it off. I don't want to chase that down. I'm just going to let it run. And in those tough conversations and these moments pop up, and fear starts setting in those fight or flight moments, and we begin to worry that we'll fail or that we might be rejected. And so we become immovable in front of this 500-pound problem. We become immovable. We become stagnant. And I'm going to say something that's pretty bold, okay? I think that God doesn't want you to waste your life being safe and careful. I don't think God wants you to waste your life being safe and careful. So safe and so careful that you won't have the conversation with your spouse that you need to have. So safe and so careful that you won't be bold about what's morally okay in your office. So safe and so careful that in tense moments you run away from the problems instead of chasing them down. Because you could miss the opportunity to serve the King, miss the chance to be what God has called us to be. I grew up with a military father. He was active duty service for 33 years. Incredible man, loving, kind, goofy, but I was terrified of him growing up. So I didn't want to make mistakes. I didn't want to do things that he would be disappointed in. I love my mom. She's sweet as pie. Like, she's one of my favorite people, and I'll tell you right now, I don't want to disappoint her. So when I was in high school and college, like, there were some choices I could have made that I didn't make, but it was because I was scared, right? And so, like, I've been told my whole life to be careful, don't get hurt, be mindful, like all these things, right? Like, be careful, don't do this, don't do that. And I think that Christians become so careful about making sure they don't do certain things that they don't end up doing anything at all. I'm going to say that again. I think Christians get so scared and so focused on doing things they shouldn't do that they don't end up doing anything at all. And there's two types of sin, okay? There's a sin of commission and omission. Commission is like if I hired somebody to paint something, I've commissioned them to paint something. And they've chosen to do it. The sin of commission is just this feeling of regret for the things you did do. And the sin of omission is just this feeling of regret you have for the things you didn't do. And I think we spend so much time focusing on the sins of commission. Don't drink, don't smoke, don't mess around, don't cuss, that we focus so much on the don't stuff that we end up really only being half Christian. Not to say those things are good. Those things are bad. We shouldn't partake in those things. But it's only half. And I think we get so focused on what we shouldn't be doing that we don't do the things we should be doing. And just because you're not doing anything wrong doesn't mean you're doing anything right. Just because you're doing nothing wrong doesn't mean you're doing anything right. And in my experience, my personal experience, my biggest regrets aren't the things I did, they're the things I didn't do. My wife and I just celebrated 6 years of marriage. 6, yeah. Amazing. We've been together for almost 9. Like, I love her. We were, like, really close friends in high school. We were friends for a long time before we dated. We dated for a long time before we got married. And we have a healthy friendship, and we still are human and disagree and have arguments. I know. Crazy. Wait, his life ain't perfect? No. It's good, but we still have disagreements. We still have arguments. And if I could be really honest with you, there are these moments where if I'm wrong, I want to be defensive and put up a wall. If I'm called out on something, I want to be defensive and put up a wall. And we know that we're both like that. And sometimes a 500-pound issue steps in, and instead of chasing after it, we distance ourselves from it. And in those moments, I know there's moments in our life where all it takes in an argument is just to point towards Jesus a little bit. All it takes in a situation is just to point towards Jesus a little bit, even if in that argument the only thing you're doing is praying with your wife out loud. And still, there's moments where I work at a church, and there's still moments where I don't do that. There's still moments where I get scared. I get worried that it'll be weird, that it'll be awkward, that I'll look crazy, that I'll look preachy. And so instead of chasing the problem, we leave the conversation open-ended. And sometimes we give into fear instead of having faith. Check this out in 1 Corinthians chapter 1:18. It says this. It says, the message that points to Christ and the cross seems like sheer silliness to those hell-bent on destruction. But for those on the way of salvation, it makes perfect sense. This is the way God works, and most powerfully as it turns out. There are plenty of moments in my life where I've had moments to say something about Jesus, to point towards Jesus in my actions, in my words. And I wish that I could go back in those moments and have that verse pop up. Because people who don't have faith in Jesus will think the Christian life is weird. That's just the reality. But to those of us who know Jesus, we know we're operating in the power of God, and we can't live in fear. Faith is just the willingness to look foolish. That's really all it is. Faith is the willingness to look foolish. And some of the most amazing lives in the Bible are followed with people who are willing to look foolish. If you don't know the story of Noah, he builds this humongous ark, and everyone thinks he's crazy until the rain starts falling. There's this girl named Sarah in the Old Testament who says she's pregnant in old age. David looks foolish when he walks up to Goliath. Peter looked foolish when he says, Jesus, if that's you in the storm, will you tell me to walk on the water? Jesus probably looked foolish, half naked on a cross. Faith is the willingness to look foolish. Noah survives the flood. Sarah has a boy. David kills a giant. Peter walks on water. And Jesus rises from the dead. And when you're faithful, willing to look foolish, you can see miracles happen in your life. When you're faithfully willing to look foolish, you can see miracles happen in your life. Because Benaniah probably looked crazy, chasing down a lion. He probably looked crazy, but he knew beyond a shadow of a doubt that his king conquered lions, so he had the faith that he could do the same. But check this out in Acts chapter 2:29. It says this. It says, dear friends, let me be completely frank with you. Our ancestor David is dead and buried. His tomb is in plain sight today. But being also a prophet and knowing that God had solemnly sworn a descendant of his would rule his kingdom, seeing far ahead, he talked of the resurrection of the Messiah. He said, no trip to Hades, no stench of death. This Jesus God raised up, and every one of us is here to witness it. David was a king that conquered lions and giants. And so Benaniah believed he could conquer lions and giants. We have a king, Jesus, who conquered death. Think about that. Death. Conquered death. And when you have a king that conquers death, nothing after you believe that. Our lives should look different, and people should be able to tell. You might not remember this. Do you guys remember the show Extreme Home Makeover? It was like the cry fest of the early 2000s. And so and apparently if you watch it with your mom at like 10 o'clock at night, you cry really loud. Whatever. I guess everyone does it, right? And so this show, it was incredible. It was emotional. It was beautiful. It's all about helping people in dark seasons in their life. And what they do is they find a family in need. They completely redo their home, the stuff they're into. They send them to like a trip for the weekend. And this crew comes in and is putting in like indoor pools and indoor theaters. And it's like this super sick house. And then at the end of the show, they get them out of the bus and they line them up here. And the house is there. And there's this huge bus in between them and the house, right? And one of the most popular sayings in the show is like, move that bus, right? And so everyone's like, move that bus. And you're on the couch like, move that bus. You know what I mean? And they move the bus and the camera hones in on the family. And the kids are jumping up and down. The mom's like crying. The dad has like snot bubbling out of his nose. There's always that one tough person that's got like just the one solemn tear. And you're like, I knew they had emotions, right? And it's crazy because, like, if I walked in on my mom watching that show and that was the only part of it I saw, I'd be like, what is this? Why? Like, you're just watching people cry? You're just watching people, like, I can't even tell what emotion this is. Happiness and sadness? I don't get it. Like, if that was the only piece of the show I saw, it wouldn't make sense. But then the camera shows you the house. And all of a sudden you think, oh, I get why they're going nuts now. I get it. That makes sense. And sometimes you'll be at a wedding, right? And there's always that one person that goes to weddings, and they say this famous line that they think is theirs, but it's actually really common. They say, during the wedding, I don't like to look at the bride when she comes down the aisle, even though she's dreamed her whole life of this moment and saved up all this money, and her parents paid all this money, and she's hoping that people will call her pretty. I don't like to look at the wife. I like to look at the groom. I like to see how he responds, right? It's like, that's not a pickup line anymore. But we still think it is. And it's like, but it's the truth. Like, you watch the groom, and if you just see that, it doesn't make sense. But then when you see what he's looking at, you're like, I get it. I totally get it. And the reality is in our life, people are going to look at you and not get it. They're going to look at you, but they don't see Jesus yet. People are going to look at you and think maybe you're crazy. Why are you talk like that? Why are you living like that? But when you serve a king that conquers death, who cares? You keep living that life, and eventually people get curious, and then they have that moment where the bus moves, and it makes sense. Our lives should be different, and we should be pointing people to see Jesus. So that question, what are you doing with your time? If it's answered with anything other than pointing people to Jesus, I don't believe we're doing it right. There's nothing more important than that. And if you're here, I want to challenge you in a couple of things as we close. If you're here and you're like, yeah, I'm not pointing to Jesus, I want to challenge you to say, like, do like a list of your life and say, okay, where can I start? And if you're in a place where you're like, I'm already doing that, bro. I'm super religious. I already be pointing to stuff. It's like, that's cool that you feel that confident. I don't sometimes. But if that's you, then you can't do it by yourself. There's this idea flooding our culture right now where it's like, I don't need church. I have a relationship on my own. It's like, I get that. But if you want to grow, you need people, man. You need people that will call you up short. You need people that will encourage you and build you up. And if you want that, if you want deep relationships, I'm gonna be bold and tell you right now where you can get them. Your deep relationships don't happen in this room. I wish they did. That'd be easy. Your deep relationships won't happen in small groups. They won't happen as you're walking in and out of this building. It's going to happen when you serve with someone. When you go into battle with someone, when you're serving with someone, you're creating these deep relationships where you're both chasing the same thing. That's where your deep relationships come from. And then if you're pointing to Jesus, it has to be more than just in this room. It has to be at work. It has to be in your marriage. It has to be at your home. Husbands, if a wife walks up to you today in the parking lot and says, you know what, like, we do need to have a tough conversation, don't look at your fantasy score. I'm serious. Tell me that's not running. Tell me that's chasing your marriage, checking that score before having the conversation, because it's not. Because we have to be willing to chase down that 500-pound problem, because if Jesus can defeat death, then we can defeat that through him. Everything in our life should be pointing to Jesus. We should be pointing our life towards him. Would you pray with me? Jesus, we love you so much. We just pray, Jesus, that today we would have the courage to chase down those 500-pound problems in our life. We'd have the courage to reach out to people so we're not doing it alone. We'd have the courage to not talk about being the underdog, but being an overcomer. That God, you've already overcome death, so we can overcome things. We can overcome anxiety. We can overcome depression. We can overcome relational conflict. And we can do it by taking a step and saying, my King can conquer this. So can I. Jesus, we love you. In your name I pray these things. Amen.